Welcome everybody to the today session of the Art and Tech Society. My name is Peter Novitzky and I will be presenting today. Before I start, I would like to say thanks to Mayra, Linda, and Margot for organizing this session. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to present a summary on philosophy and the ethics of technology today. I would like to mention that this session is pre-recorded, however, the discussion will be live. So I'm very much looking forward to your questions and comments. Before I start, let me share my screen. So what we are going to talk about is what is our concept of technology and how do we understand its influence on our daily lives. First, let's have a look at the ancient interpretation of technology, because the word techne is of a Greek origin, and one of the very influential philosophers, Western philosophers, Aristotle, discussed the role of techne in his system and in his ethics. His focus in his ethical theory is the idea that possessing excellent traits of character is required to be a good person. The overall goal of every human being is to reach a good life or achieve a good life, and this is achieved by human flourishing, reaching a well-being on some sort of happiness, and this is happening through a realization of one's unique human potential. How do we achieve a good life? He says that we achieve this through virtues. These are good intellectual and moral character traits. Most of you might be familiar with the moral virtues that he lists. These are basically the in-between positions between the two extremes. However, he lists also intellectual virtues that all of us should possess, and these are listed as scientific knowledge or episteme, which is a knowledge of what is necessary, general and universal, an artistic or technical knowledge, or techne, which is a knowledge of how to make things or how to develop a craft. An intuitive reason, or nous, is the process of establishing the first principles of knowledge. A practical wisdom, or phronesis, is the capacity to act in accordance with the good of humanity or make the right choices for right action. It is the ability of choosing the right means between the two vices. And finally, a philosophic wisdom, which is a sophia, which is a combination of the intuitive reason and the scientific knowledge. He says in his ethical theory that achieving virtues and good life happens through a habitual pattern. So the virtues are acquired by repeated practice and they need to be learned. So we are not born with them. Now, as mentioned, these are the three main intellectual virtues that we are going to discuss today. The scientific knowledge, or episteme, which is knowledge of what is necessary, general or universal. The artistic and technological knowledge, or techne. This gives the origin of the word technology. So it is a form of knowledge that how to make things or how to develop a craft. And then the phronesis, or the practical wisdom, that is a knowledge of the right choices for the right action. The techne is actually a knowledge associated with a particular practice of making or developing a craft. So originally it referred to carpenter's craft knowledge for Aristotle, how to make objects from wood. But for example, other knowledge, the captain's techne is actually the knowledge of how to pilot a ship or drive a ship. Musician's techne is how to play a particular kind of instrument, or a physician's techne is how to heal a patient. And you can see that these are the main elements, and I highlighted the techne because this is how we interpret it nowadays. However, we have to understand Aristotle's approach, which doesn't understand the various intellectual virtues separately. They all should be present in a human person. All human beings should try to achieve these. So in Aristotle's interpretation, there is no dichotomy between the object and the subject. This is a very modern idea, that there is me and there is something outside of me. And therefore, there is also no split between a theory and practice. These are, again, very modern and contemporary assumptions where we distinguish between a theory as a domain of knowledge and practice, which is a domain of the craft or the art. Because if we split these, within science, the theory strives for a value-free view of reality, and the consequence is then that scientific theory cannot tell us how things should be or how to lead our lives. And again, if we separate the knowledge and the theory from the practice, a pure theory is then removed from ethical investigation, and the practice of living requires it. So basically, the modern understanding, the dichotomous understanding of the object-subject and the splitting the theory and the practice leads basically to a split between the virtues that do not apply, let's say, from 9 to 5 until I'm focusing on the scientific or the artistic knowledge, and not on the practical wisdom, and then and I'm pausing them, and then I can focus on the other aspects of life. This is not how Aristotle interpreted it, and they should be understood as interconnected, and they should be strived for continuously. Now, what is a technology from the modern understanding? Here there is a very influential modern philosopher, Martin Heidegger. He in his very wide philosophical theory looked into what is common to all entities that makes them entities. He understands a human being as a very special type of being, because it's a being for whom being is a question. And while he was a very, and still is a very influential philosopher, in a scholarly debate, he's also a very controversial one because of his sympathies towards the National Socialist Party in Germany. However, in 1953, he wrote a book, The Questions Concerning Technology, where he describes technology as a way of uncovering what is uncovered, a special constellation where the essence of truth is revealed or concealed. And he distinguishes between old technologies and contemporary technologies. You have to put this into context. In the 1950s, we are after the nuclear bomb. All sorts of new innovations emerged that were rather disruptive, or we will call them disruptive. So he started to think about what these technologies are enabling or establishing, and what they are bringing about. And he says, he distinguishes the old technology, which their approach was the approach of revealing. They were making things, or they were bringing things to fore, while the contemporary technologies' nature is in their essence challenging us. So they not only challenge nature, they also challenge us as human beings, and they also challenge us to challenge the nature. Let's have a look at some examples. Think about a windmill. Which is an old technology in his, would be an old technology in his understanding. A windmill had to submit to the standards set by nature. It depends how strong the wind blows. However, if you think about the more contemporary technology, which is a Three Gorges Dam in the Yangtze River, the laws of the nature do not need to be followed that much, and can basically, these technologies can set the standards themselves. So this is how nature can be challenged. However, think about other technologies like the ENIAC, where us as human beings were challenged through the computational power of these machines. And think about the cryogenic freezing booths, where humans are being frozen for a later time, enabled to be treated against diseases that we cannot treat nowadays. And there are people who are paying for this technology. So this is basically challenging humans to challenge the nature, to live longer than it is possible. So what we can see from the Heideggerian point of view is that there is a rather negative relationship towards modern technology in his view, where it is not only a tool, or it's not understood as a tool, but something that questions us. It's able to eliminate us and definitely challenges us. Now there is another thinker, Langdon Winner, who asked the same question. So what is technology? And he distinguishes between the technology in a singular form and a plural form. By technology, he means the abstract notion of all of modern practical artifice. And in the plural form, on the technologies, he understands smaller or larger pieces of system of hardware of a specific kind. And he then goes on and he elaborates that the artifacts are basically the relative discrete objects or components that has been created intentionally for a particular function. Think about the car. Then there are socio-technological systems, which represent a set of artifacts to create or enable some form of activity. So if you are staying at the car example, a road infrastructure would be a socio-technological system. And then he distinguishes also politics, that he describes as arrangements of power and authority in human associations, as well as the activities that take place within those arrangements. So if we stick to the car example, the artifacts are the cars, the socio-technological systems are the road, the system is the road infrastructure, and the politics there are the traffic rules. Why are these distinctions so important? Because he says that the physical arrangements of industrial production, warfare, communications, and the like have fundamentally changed the exercise of power and the experience of citizenship. So what he highlights in his paper from the 1980s is, and the title of the paper is, "Do Artifacts Have Politics?" He tries to highlight that technological artifacts do matter. The artifacts complement theories of social determination of technology. So they are political phenomena in their own right. And the political arrangements are not only the result of our social determinants. So he puts himself in between of the two rather extreme theories of the social determinism, which says that only human beings decide how the society looks like and its political system, and the technological determinism, where the only elements that matter are the artifacts, and that the technology develops as the sole results of their internal dynamics. So he highlights that indeed technological artifacts have a role in our societies, and we need to pay more attention on the technical artifacts themselves. So he says that there are some artifacts that are non-flexible. They require a specific political setup. Think about a nuclear power plant, which requires a hierarchical system of leadership and management. There must be always somebody who decides, otherwise it cannot operate safely. And he says that technical artifacts are inherently political because they often require a specific sociocultural design. So think about a ship. Again, it is highly prone to have a hierarchical leadership when it is outside on the sea, but when it is docked, it does not need that leadership that much when it is being loaded. So that's Langdon Winner's approach. And just to highlight a very practical example that he puts in his article, there was this book by Robert A. Caro from 1974. It has more than 1,300 pages about Robert Moses. He's basically the main architect and main designer of New York, how we know it these days. He wrote that book in the 1970s, and he received a Pulitzer Prize for it. And in this book, Robert A. Caro describes Robert Moses' design in a Vantec Parkway, which you can see on the top picture. It's basically a leading road and the park around it that leads to the Jones Beach. And there is a story in that book that is described by Sidney M. Shapiro, former chief engineer and the general manager of the Long Island State Park Commission, who says that these bridges were purposely built low to thwart motorists, especially buses, to make the park easily accessible to non-motorists. Now we know that this story is not as it was presented in that book. However, that snippet from the Bloomberg City Lab refers to this story that, yeah, indeed, the author went and measured all of the bridges, and they are indeed lower than the average New York bridge in the whole city. And basically what it says that by limiting the height of the bridges, certain motor vehicles were not allowed to the park and to the beach, and especially certain higher motor vehicles like buses were not allowed to reach the beaches, and that this then had a consequence that certain socioeconomic groups did not have an access to the beach and to the park. The authors or the author of the book and who recollected this story, Sidney M. Shapiro, says that basically the idea behind this is that buses could not drive to Jones Beach and to other beaches. However, this is not necessarily true. They were able to reach other parts or other roads, the beach through other roads. However, it is true that the bridges are lower than the average, and that's also true that Robert Moses was representing certain racist views towards Black people and the Puerto Ricans, and he might have had that kind of opinion and incentive to not allow these groups to reach the beaches, and to allow only the privileged ones and the more affluent socioeconomic groups. And this, in Langdon Winner's view, and the design of these bridges provides a good example how design and engineering can represent politics in a very practical and very limiting manner. So how the bridge is designed and limited the access to the park and to the beach in New York represents a very political stance that in his view highlights that it's not only just the technology and the design itself that is being represented here. Now, I was planning to go on with multiple other examples to highlight this distinction of Langdon Winner and Martin Heidegger. However, last weekend I watched a movie distributed by Netflix, The Social Dilemma, which is causing a lot of waves in the discussions amongst engineers and non-engineers, especially philosophers and ethicists. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend to watch it. It's basically a documentary with former executives, managers, consultants, directors, and senior vice presidents, etc., of the big five. So Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter, representatives of NVIDIA, so the leading technological firms, where they highlight that they are rather scared of what they designed and they made to happen with these or enabled to happen with these technologies. I think their main statement, what they want to communicate in this movie, is that if the service is free, you are the product. They feel rather ashamed, or they express their wonderment that they helped develop the so-called attention buying economy. So businesses are bidding for users' attention towards the big five companies, and the highest bidder wins the more screen time on your mobile phone and on your computer. And basically, this happens on the fly. So as we are browsing actively the websites, this bidding happens in the background without the knowledge of our of the users, of us, and these companies are not transparent about it and how this functions as well. And we are basically also constantly monitored how we react to these ads. So for the interesting element that these engineers disclosed in this movie was that they actively prohibit using these technologies that they helped engineer to engineer and design for their children. So they do not allow to use them. And they are also asked certain questions about the future. What do you think? What's next with all these technologies let loose to the citizens and large population, global population? They are very concerned about the information bubble, that people are getting polarized within societies, but not only democratic societies, but any societies. And they're really concerned about a potential civil war, because that's the main idea, to develop these kind of polarizations within the societies, to win elections and to activize voters. So to go back to the Langdon Winner's distinction or question whether technologies have politics, his answer is yes. And based on this and watching this movie, we can say yes, yeah, they definitely have politics. And this kind of element or characteristic of modern technologies is actually gaining attention, increasing attention. Think about AI and their racial bias. Think about machine learning or facial recognition, and how they prohibit certain activities, again, live on the fly in certain parts of the world, but basically it happens globally. And we have to go back to the question, the overall question that Aristotle is asking: what kind of human beings we want to be, and indirectly what kind of societies we want to live in. And I would like to invite you all to comment. If you watch the movie, please share your opinions and share your comments. I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and thank you for being here and listening to this short presentation.